This is harder than I thought. Hello, welcome to TESOL Smash. My name is Alex. Today we're going to be looking at cognitive and metacognitive strategies for reading authentic texts online.
So the cognitive model focuses on the perceptual modes of learners. And when it comes to language learning, it views language learning as an extension of the learner's existing knowledge. When it comes to reading, students are supposed to be exposed to authentic text that have been recorded in natural situations rather than artificially made materials. The main goal of the student is to find out the message systems for themselves and to recognize the textual meaning of the text. Now, they can figure out the textual meaning if they can find out its four main components. The first one is the environment. So the students have to establish for themselves the context of the text, who it talks about, where, when. Then after that, he moves to the intent. Why is the author saying what he's saying? What is the author trying to convince the reader of? Is he informing the reader? Is he trying to persuade the reader? After that, the reader is supposed to look at the logic of presenting information. Did the writer use list, descriptions, or comparisons to present his information? Then the final stage is to compare language with information logic. Is there a consistency between the language used and the logic of presenting information? Now, when it comes to the classroom, the teacher can focus on four main things. First, he has to guide the students on distinguishing between the text intent, the teacher's intent, and the reader's intent, and how each one of them affects the textual meaning and the understanding of it. Then after that, the teachers are supposed to drive the students' attention to the textual logic, meaning the structure of the text and how information is presented. After that, he can practice with the students articulating the information details. And finally, after the students have recognized the textual meaning of the text, they can express their reaction to it. When doing all of this, the students will be practicing critical thinking skills. All of this classroom focus can follow certain strategies to achieve this. First of all, the teacher can focus on the strategy of comprehension by finding out the text structure and summarizing the text. Also, he can guide the students to using the strategy of problem solving by identifying the problem, setting a plan, trying the plan, and then later on evaluating that plan. He can also guide the students to use reasoning strategies by articulating their arguments, their agreement or disagreement with the text, and evaluating the evidence they provide for their argument. And finally, they can also practice self-regulation strategies when they are reading by self-monitoring and time management.
Metacognition. It is the awareness and understanding that you have of your thinking, your thought processes. And it's really important for language learners. And as teachers, we need to think about how we can design lessons, specifically reading lessons we're talking about, that incorporate metacognitive strategies. Learners need to be able to adapt their strategies whilst they're reading. If, for example, they are reading a text, it's important that when they are not understanding everything, that they realize this, that they stop and they think about the ways they are approaching the text and how they can change things to achieve their goals. So, for example, what strategies can learners adopt? They can adopt strategies before reading, during reading, and after reading. For example, before reading, in the planning stage, they could make some predictions. Predictions not only about the content of the text they're going to read, but also predictions about the structure, the layout of the text. They might also want to think of what questions will they want answered whilst reading. During the text, during reading, they are going to be monitoring their progress. And there are lots of questions that they should be asking themselves. Do I understand what I just read? Which sentences or passages were particularly difficult? If I didn't understand, what can I do? Do I need to be asking for help? What does the writer really want me to understand here? And then after reading, their job is not done. They have to evaluate that whole process. The strategy that they adopted for reading, did it work? Do they need to change it for next time? And really, was it effective? Did they really understand what they read? Could they rephrase it in their own words? Will they remember what they read? So some of these metacognitive skills, we might think as language teachers that our learners will already have them when they come to the classroom, but this is often not the case. It's really important that we as language teachers choose reading materials and design lessons that help our learners take their reading skills to a higher level, make sure that they are reading deeply in class. One thing that we might want to use is authentic materials, online materials. These are very useful because they're often quite complex. And it's important that we're choosing complex materials because if the materials are too basic, it's really not giving the learners an opportunity to enhance these metacognitive skills.
So now we can apply some of these metacognitive and cognitive strategies directly to reading authentic material online. And many of the cognitive and metacognitive strategies for reading physical offline things can be applied to online reading. But there is an extra dimension to online texts that you don't have with physical texts. So sometimes students use hybrid strategies. That means they use techniques that they use for standard offline reading and can apply them to online reading, them adapting them a little bit. An example of a hybrid strategy would be using the mouse to highlight certain vocabulary or highlight a phrase in the same way that on physical text they might use a highlighter or underline certain words. Another example is navigating through the text to find relevant information. So in a physical text, they might be using headings and subheadings to find the information they want. Online, they might be using the navigation bar and using links to find the information they want. But on top of this, online reading requires some extra skills and strategies. And one salient feature of online reading is hypertext and hypermedia. So that means there are links to different pages, links to different parts of the same site, videos or graphics or audio as well. So one unique strategy to reading online texts is using hyperlinks to other authentic texts to build an understanding, a greater understanding of the target text. This can be useful when using an authentic text when a lot of the information, a lot of the language might be particularly unfamiliar to the students. So this hypermedia aspect of online reading means that students don't read, or often don't read, in a linear fashion. So they don't just scroll through the text one paragraph after another. They move around in maybe a more nodular fashion. So they follow one link, read some information there, then come back to the original text. So this provides a lot of learner autonomy because they can choose which links to follow, they can choose how much of that text to read before they come back. So there's quite a lot of learner autonomy in this strategy, but that also presents a bit of a danger in students becoming distracted and maybe reading too much of the extra text or link hopping further and further away from the task. As such, maintaining a task focus might be a particularly important strategy for reading authentic online text because the potential for link hopping and moving far away from the original text is basically unlimited. So the fact that authentic texts are rarely graded and rarely geared towards learners means that the learners may come across a lot of quite complex language or cultural references that they are unfamiliar with or don't know at all. And the learners can deal with these problems or solve these problems with another unique aspect of online reading, which is extra online functions and online tools, such as online dictionaries, online encyclopedias, which can be in their L1 as well, translation software, image searches, concordances, or simply using Google searches. These extra features help a student break down a text, and it can be beneficial for those who struggle with reading conventional texts. So, as I said, with hypertextuality and the availability of these extra online tools, learners' reading patterns are non-linear and multiple. So they're reading in this nodular fashion. They use different reading patterns for different pages and different situations. But that might not necessarily be a bad thing, because many authentic texts are set up with this type of reading in mind. So this type of non-linear and multiple reading strategy is an appropriate and useful strategy for students to adopt and think about. Conversely, poorly designed websites might hinder learner strategies, and unlike many offline texts, the format and the layout and the design of websites is not very formulaic and might not necessarily be intuitive to the learners. As such, problem-solving strategies to navigate through unfamiliar formats, to navigate through unfamiliar layouts or unintuitively designed websites can be another important strategy for using authentic texts online.
That's it.